Hey everybody, and welcome to Thursday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff live right here on Giants.com and the Giants mobile app. John Schmeelk, Matt Citak with you, brought to you by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. Apologize for the late start. Coordinators went a little bit long. I had to get a couple sound bites from Shane Bowen for our radio pregame show. Ran in here, and we're rocking and rolling. Mr. Citak, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Doing all right. Giants taking on the Saints on Thursday. We'll do our normal little diagnostic on the Saints. I know a lot of people aren't obsessed with these actual games, but we do still have 5 more to play. We got to talk about them. So the Saints are a team here that obviously one of the 2 teams, I believe, that have changed head coaches midseason
3
this year. Who's the third one? Jets, Saints, and
Bears.
That's right. Eberflus was this week. That's right. Thank you. So Dennis Allen, no longer the head coach. Darren Rizzi, the former special teams coordinator.
Local guy.
Now the head coach. Yeah, Bergen Catholic. I think, right?
I believe so.
I think it's Bergen Catholic,
Yeah.
right? So he's the head coach of the team. The Saints have come in, and they've been a weird team this year. You kind of go through their games. Some games they look great. Other games they've looked terrible. And then other games they've kind of looked okay. So I think you're trying to figure out each week which one of these Saints teams is going to show up and play.
Yeah, I mean, they started off the season 2-0. They scored 47 and 44 points, respectively, in the first 2 games, which had everyone talking about, oh, is this Saints offense going to be the best offense in the league this season? And then they proceeded to lose the next 7 games. Dennis Allen got fired. They turned it over to Darren Rizzi. But since Darren Rizzi's taken over, I will say they have looked better. And they have played better. They won the first 2 games under Darren Rizzi. Then they went into the bye in Week 12. Came back last week, lost to the LA Rams, but it was a close game. They lost 21-14. They also did lose Taysom Hill this past Sunday for the season to a torn ACL. Taysom Hill, the guy's been a versatile offensive weapon for the Saints for years now, but this year was potentially, I think, the best version of Taysom Hill that we had seen. I mean, they were really using him all over the field and was getting the most efficient and production from him that we've seen. So that is definitely a big blow to the Saints team. But this is a Saints team that wants to, I feel like their number 1 priority on offense is to run the football.
Yeah.
They rank inside the top 10 in just about all the different rushing metrics, attempts, yards, touchdowns, yards per attempt. I'm sure if you go into the advanced metrics, they're up there as well.
Yep.
So Alvin Kamara, this could be, he's their leading rusher, obviously, been one of the best backs in the league for a while.
He's kind of the leading everything at this point with all their injuries.
He is the leading everything. And honestly, it worries me a little bit having him go up against this now very depleted Giants defensive front.
Yeah, you think it should.
With Dexter Lawrence out, Nacho at least not practicing yesterday. Even, those 2 guys' backups, DJ Davidson and Jordan Riley, were both limited in yesterday's practice. It's going to be a situation where, let's assume Davidson and Riley can go. They'll probably be the starters. We'll see a lot of Elijah Chapman and on earlier downs, not just the passing downs that we've, grown accustomed to seeing him play the last month and a half or so. And then we're going to probably see some combination of Corey Durden, who we just signed off of the Rams practice squad. Some of the guys that are on the Giants practice squad at the moment, Elijah Garcia, Casey Rogers. We don't really know. Other than Davidson and Riley and a little bit of Chapman, we haven't seen any of the other guys play.
Correct.
So we don't really know what they'll bring, but it's safe to say that no matter who is out there, it's obviously a step down from Dexter Lawrence.
And you didn't even mention Bobby Okereke, who is
that was
another guy.
The defensive line.
Yeah, that was just the tip of the iceberg. You get Bobby Okereke, who didn't practice yesterday with a back injury. He was in that group that Brian Dable kind of deemed as a week-to-week deal. We'll keep an eye on what he's going to say to the media in a little bit. Maybe Okereke will practice today. It'll look a bit better. But that'll probably end up being Darius Muasau. If you were a little prophetic on Tuesday, talking about Deontay Johnson's potential return, his
I had
practice.
my Brian Windhorst moment.
Yes.
You know the meme I'm talking about?
Yes, I did that. So it means...
What's going on?
Yeah, exactly. Something's up here. But I was asked on one of my radio hits yesterday with our affiliate down in Easton, Pennsylvania. They're like, well, Deontay Johnson this week? And I'm like, guys, he hasn't played since August. And his practice window just opened. Like, you can't ask that much of him after, 2 days of practice to get it back on the practice field. So I think it'll be mostly Darius Muasau for this particular week.
I will say, at least in terms of health, we don't know for sure, but I feel like he's probably at 100% health.
I would hope so. It's been a while.
The injury he suffered, I believe it was a sprained ankle in the preseason opener, the first preseason game. So beginning of August we're talking about. And even if you want to call it a high ankle sprain, which we don't know the severity of the ankle sprain, let's just say it was the high ankle sprain. It's been 4 months now?
Yeah.
Like he should be at 100% health. So at least in terms of health-wise, I expect him to be, at 100%. But I agree with you, having that long of a layoff, this is his first week actually practicing. It's not exactly realistic to expect him to, if Okereke is out, to step in and all of a sudden play 80+% of the defensive snaps. It's probably unrealistic. But I hope he is out there. I hope they activate him. Saturday, he's out there getting his feet wet a little bit. And, depending on the severity of Okereke's injury, maybe over the last month of the season, he sees his playing time increase a little bit more and more, just so we can, see what we've got with him.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Showed a lot of promise in training camp. Like he was really one of probably the defensive standout in the first few weeks of training camp until he suffered that injury.
Saints on offense, they're banged up. Their wide receivers, Rashid Shaheed and Chris Olave, who were their two starters to start the year, they're both out. I would be surprised if we saw either one for the rest of the year. Olave's dealing, I think he got a second concussion a couple of weeks ago. No need to rush him back given their record. So I think they'll be without those two guys. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is somebody that they picked up. He's a deep ball threat, obviously. Kevin Austin Jr., who I'm honestly not familiar with his work. Cedric Wilson, former Cowboy. Giant fan should know him. And then once a Giant, always a Giant. Dante Pettis on the Saints roster as well. So that's someone we might end up seeing at some point during the game.
Bub Means back?
But
I know he was hurt.
He's listed on IR on ESPN's depth chart. I can't promise you that's up to date, but he was not available last week. So
and Mason Tipton?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that gentleman's work either. So they play a lot of tight ends. Juwan Johnson, Foster Moreau, though they're both banged up a little bit. They lost Taysom Hill. So they have a couple offensive linemen that are banged up. Eric McCoy, Cesar Ruiz, Nick Saldivari. All of them have dealt with injuries over the last couple of weeks. So we'll see who's available. Not an explosive offense by any means, though Valdez-Scantling has been a very reliable deep threat in this league for a few years now. To your point, they want to run the ball. Derek Carr, solid veteran quarterback, not going to blow you away, but he's not going to kill you either. So to me, Citak heading into this game, and again, the same radio hood I mentioned previously, I said this yesterday, I'm going to force somebody other than Alvin Kamara to beat me in this game. You load your rear ends up at the line of scrimmage, all right, and you just say, they ain't running the ball on us. If I had to put 8 or 9 guys in there, I don't care. Make somebody else not named Alvin Kamara beat you in this game, and that's how I would approach things.
I am with you 100%. The number one priority for the Giants defense on Sunday has to be to try their best to slow down Alvin Kamara in this rushing attack, because as we both mentioned, they want to run the football. Derek Carr has been okay. He hasn't been, lighting the world up. He hasn't been awful either. He's sort of just, been okay.
He's been fine.
He's been fine. Now, the one thing that concerns me outside of Alvin Kamara and just the run defense in general, because it's no surprise, it's no secret the Giants' run defense has struggled this season. But outside of the run game, and I mentioned this on the Giants Hangout this week, is that the Giants have been struggling, to say the least, to defend the deep ball this season. Next gen stats.
Now, this is efficiency wise, not necessarily numerical wise.
Yes.
Efficiency
wise. So every week before the game, next gen stats puts out some what they call insights, just various stats from them about the game in particular. And for this week on the Giants defense, it says that the Giants defense has allowed a completion percentage 69.2% on deep passes, so the 20 or more air yards this season, which not only is the highest since Next Gen Stats started controlling or measuring this data, which is 2016.
And is that 20-plus yard throws?
20-plus yard air yards, yeah.
Got it.
So not only is it the highest of any defense since at least 2016, but the 69.2%, no other team has ever finished with allowing opposing passers to complete more than 60% of those same passes. and the Giants are nearly at 70.
Well, and I think I dropped that stat to you a couple weeks ago, right, where the Giants had allowed a perfect quarterback rating on passes of 20-plus air yards. So those things go hand in hand.
And the reason that scares me this week in particular, because probably the Saints' number one wide receiver at this point is Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Mm-hmm. And while he's certainly not, the most talented wide receiver in the NFL, the one thing that he does as good as anyone else in the league is burn you deep and catch those 40, 50-plus yard receptions. So while I agree that stopping Kamara has to be the number one priority, you got to still respect that deep ball, and you can't, get too fooled with, a play-action play where Derek Carr then just throws it to a wide-open MVS who's 20 yards behind your nearest defender and just walks it into the end zone. That's the deep ball has to be the number two priority, and just don't get burned by that long deep ball, because Derek Carr is going to be looking for it.
And then defensively, the Saints are an interesting team. They've kind of gone through a little bit of a transformation. They've replaced a lot of their older veteran players with younger players. They got a couple veterans still left. Teron Matthew, Cameron Jordan, and Demario Davis are kind of like their guys left from the previous group. And then you have guys like they traded Marshawn Lattimore from that group. But then the rest of the guys that you look at, you have some young guys like Brian Brzee, who is 6.5 sacks. Chase Young is someone they brought in this year. Khalil McKinstry at cornerback's another guy they have. So they have kind of a combination of youth and veterans here on their defense, trying to, put things together. And their defense, even with, the loss of Drew Brees, their defense has kind of been what's kept the Saints respectable over the past few years. It's fallen apart a bit this year. 30th in yards per game, 31st in yards per play, 17th EPA, 23rd in success rate. This is not the Saints defense that we've seen a lot of over the last 3 years. They've struggled a bit. So I would think the Giants should be able to both run and pass the ball over 5 yards per carry with their rush defense. Their success rate is second worst in the league. EPA, third worst in the league against the run. And then their pass metrics aren't that much better. So I think this could be a big Tyrone Tracy game, run the ball on them a little bit. And, I think the Giants should be able to hang in this game and make it a one-score game in the fourth quarter. The Saints aren't a team that runs away from people. Granted, we said this about the Cowboys last week. That didn't work well. But they don't have those same individual pass rushers that the Cowboys had, like Michael Parsons, I think, to really challenge the Giants' offensive tackles with, and we'll see if Evan Neal plays. Will it be either Hubbard and Neal or Hubbard and Azudu?
Yeah, I agree with you. I will say, though, that they do have Chase Young as one of their defensive ends.
He's played well this
year. He is having a good season. He has a career-high 15.8 pressure rate this season, 51 pressures on 323 pass rushes, the fifth most among edge rushers, according to Next Gen Stats.
Total pressures? Or the rate is the third most?
The pressures is the 51 pressures is the most. Fifth most, I mean. And the thing that worries me slightly is another Next Gen stat here is that Young has aligned as the Saints' right side edge rusher on 89.9% of defensive snaps, which means they don't really switch sides with him, at least not too much.
It'll be him versus Hubbard then.
And if Illuminor and Neal are not able to play, that means Christopher Hubbard will be the left tackle. And on the flip side, Christopher Hubbard has allowed a 19.1% pressure rate since stepping in as the starting left tackle about a month ago, which is the highest among 36 left tackles that have been on the field for at least 150 pass block snaps. So if that matchup is what, comes to be on Sunday, that would worry me a little bit. Now,
understandably
we do have a little bit of encouraging news in that Coach Dable said just now that both Jermaine Illuminor and Evan Neal will practice in some capacity today.
All right. I like that.
Obviously, they will. It's clear they'll be listed as limited, so we don't really know how much they're going to do, but at least gives them a better chance of being able to play on Sunday than if they did not practice at all. So, I mean, especially if Illuminor getting him back at left tackle for that matchup against Chase Young, that would be huge for the pass protection. Dable also said, though, on a not as good note, that Bobby Okereke, Deontay Banks, and Nacho all not practicing on Thursday, which puts their status more in doubt.
Yeah, Okereke and
Sunday.
Nacho, I'd worry about.
Yeah, I mean, and Banks too. I mean, he didn't
Of course,
practice
yes.
at all last week and missed last week's game with the rib injury. I mean, hopefully we'll see them back on the practice field in some capacity tomorrow. If they miss tomorrow, then it would not surprise me if when the final injury report comes out that all three are listed as out.
I mean, the
does
rib
not
is
come to
just
that.
is pain tolerance, right? Like, you got to figure out. I mean, I'm assuming if it was fractured, he'd probably be on injured reserve. So it's just a matter of whether or not he could tackle, right? I mean, that's the thing there, and if he can move well enough with the pain with his ribs and figure that out. But this isn't the game where not having Deontay Banks is going to kill you because they don't have that slew of
true.
wide receivers. And I think Cordell Flot's actually played pretty well too, to be honest with you. So that I'm more worried about the Okereke, Nacho, Dexter Lawrence all being out combination with Alvin Kamara.
For sure. That is
It's a problem.
I mean, would love all three of those defenders back on the
course.
field, but if I had to choose, Bobby Okereke is priority number one because his impact on the run game obviously is very significant.
No, I'm with you. All right, 201-939-4513, 201-939-4513. Giants Huddle Podcast. O'Hara up yet? Pearson, he is? Not yet? Okay, well, coming up later today will be Sean O'Hara. I spoke to him yesterday about the Giants, kind of where they're at, some offensive line stuff with them. Drew Lock, we went through the whole gamut with Sean. So that'll go up a little bit later on today on the Giants Huddle Podcast. And then tomorrow we'll have our normal player interview. That'll be Tyler Nubin. And then we'll have our regular game preview as well. So make sure you go check that out on the Giants Huddle Podcast, giants.com/podcast. Just search for Giants Huddle or Giants Podcast Network on your favorite podcast platform, or just go to the Giants mobile app. All right, 201-939-4513. Let's go to the phones here. Guys, we appreciate it. We know this has been a tough year, and we know that there's not a ton to talk about game-wise, but obviously there's still a lot of topics with the Giants. We appreciate you guys still listening and calling in and making us part of your daily ritual and your daily schedule. We really do appreciate that. Let's start off with Cliff in New York. Cliff, what's going on?
Hey, guys. Looking from Monday's show, having to face the possibility of not winning another game and the rest of the season, and how that really puts a lot of pressure on John Mara. But so far, it made me think about, how we got where we are and why I was still optimistic about this regime, especially. It seems to me that the problems we've been facing the last few years really go back to the aftermath of the last championship, when you have a coach, Coughlin and Eli, with a very special relationship, and you got all kinds of talent in the trenches, etc. And then we go into this mystery period, which I'll be looking for you to help fill in, because I sort of came in following more closely with Gettleman, and the big knock in going into 2018 was that the draft had not produced a re-signing with the Giants. Not only that, in the few years before that.
Yeah, real quick, Cliff. The Giants draft from 2012 to like 2016, not great.
No.
Right.
Not great.
And we not only didn't re-sign them, but those people were no longer found anywhere in the league.
Also correct.
That turned around under Gettleman, whether anybody wanted to give him credit for anything or not. Even in the 2018, the last time I looked at that draft.
Now, Cliff, there were hits in there, but there were some misses in the mid rounds in those drafts as well. But look, there were big hits with Dexter Lawrence, big hits with Andrew Thomas, obviously Saquon Barkley. Whether or not you thought you should have drafted him second overall, he was a good player. But look, they also had DeAndre Baker in the first round one year, right? Daniel Jones isn't here anymore, so there were a share of misses in there too. But you certainly did have some big hits during that era too.
Right, but when they missed, they still ended up with other teams.
Some of them.
Yeah, certainly more than before. So, but the thing about the success through the 11th season, was that involved a whole structure in house, which you guys have helped me understand more. An entire scouting department in particular, and really a whole organizational thing, getting up to speed on I don't know. I think analytics was a big part of that, or
Sure.
more than just that. So there was really a kind of a modernization going on, and that's how we got this young guy, Joe Shane, as I understand it. And he comes in with a relationship with the coach that was hired at the same time, Brian, and I'm optimistic because I was, I have a friend who's a Bills fan, and I know how they suffered up there, and the turnaround there was so dramatic that's just kind of continued to light my fire because, I did a little homework, and the Bills are like now 5 in a row in the division, and before that, before the 5 in a row, they made the wild card.
Cliff, I agree with you. What do you think the biggest factor is for why the Bills have been able to do that?
Gosh, I have no clue.
Oh, no. Yes, you do, Cliff. There's one really easy reason.
Oh, you mean the quarterback they developed?
That has something to do with it, I think, Cliff. He's really good. He's only the second best quarterback in football after Patrick Mahomes.
Right. Well, I don't think they were out of their minds with Daniel at all, including the $40 million thing that everybody liked to come back to, because for openers, they knew that number was going to be dwarfed in the next year or two, which it was, by other quarterbacks, and it wasn't just a playoff game in 22. There was a game that Shane didn't specify that he also showed something to them. Daniel did to get into the playoffs.
That Colts game.
Was it the Colts?
Yeah. Daniel played amazing in that Colts game.
And was that is that the game where at the end of the game the fans were chanting Daniel's name?
Yep, that's the win that clinched the playoffs for the Giants. Dable had the Gatorade bath, and the MetLife Stadium was chanting Daniel Jones.
Well, I mean, I can wait.
Less than 2 years ago, by the way. It shows how quickly things can change.
Well, the thing that seems to be the key to the sustained success, which is what I'm hanging in there for, not just the next winning season, but to do something like the Bills. And I don't know that has to be based totally on the quarterback.
Not solely, but it's a part of it.
Right, but your definition of sustained success for us, you said maybe it's being legitimately considered a contender in the division.
Well, Cliff, I'll put it this way. You look at the 3 eras of Giants football, and I appreciate the call. Good stuff. Where they were a really competitive football team, and they had a chance to go and win it all. They had a Hall of Fame, who we think will be a Hall of Fame quarterback in Eli Manning, a borderline Hall of Fame quarterback in Phil Simms, and then you go back to the 50s, and you had, Frank Gifford and all those other guys playing back there. That wasn't as much of a passing game back then, obviously. But you had some really, really, really good players at that position. And for younger fans, and this even goes back to the Giants in the 80s, right? And look, this is not just the Giants. This is every team. The way you win in this league, guys, it's not complicated. Be good up front on both sides of the ball. Block. Get after the quarterback. Protect your quarterback, all right? It's not that difficult. That's going to give you a good run game. I don't care who your running back is, right? Look who the Giants running back with the Super Bowls with. Joe Morris, O.J. Anderson on the back end of his career, splitting carries between Ahmad Bradshaw and Brandon Jacobs, Derek Ward, right? Like, these are not future Hall of Fame running backs, you know what I mean? And have a receiver that can make big plays for you. Whether it was Plaxico Burress in 2007 or the Hakeem Nicks-Victor Cruz combination in 2011, you need one big playmaker outside. You need a really good quarterback. You need to be good up front. That's how you win in the league. You look at the teams around the league and how they win. That's how they win. It's pretty universal. Daniel Jeremiah was on with Kevin Clark on the This Is Football podcast, which he does a nice job with that. And Jeremiah had a very simple line for teams trying to build up, and he goes, "It's really hard to be a bad football team if you have a really good offensive line. It's hard to do. If you have like a top 10 offensive line, it's really hard to be a bad football team." So the Giants are better this year, but they're better to the point where, well, they're not a bottom 5 offensive line anymore, but are they a top 10 offensive line? No, they're not there yet either, right? So stopping the run on defense, not stopping the run. They're not dominant up front on defense. You're not winning in the trenches. You don't know who the quarterback is, right? You hope you have your receiver and neighbors, right? You hope you have a running back in Tyrone Tracy. But you want to talk about building a team and building a team that can win? Be good up front, have a good quarterback, have one really good weapon outside, and then you're rolling.
Yeah, I mean,
Easier said than done, obviously, but that's the formula.
definitely easier said than done because, I feel like for years now, even dating back to before Joe Shane becoming GM, we've been talking about building up the trenches on both sides of the ball. And given where the Giants are now, clearly, I mean,
I know this year
there was an effort to build on the offensive line this year, obviously. And the first 6-7 games when everyone was healthy, the line looked significantly better.
and the pass rush was significantly better too.
Yeah, 100%. I would say the one area that has, I guess, kind of struggled throughout the season has been the run defense.
Yep.
Which to me still doesn't make sense given that was one of the best things the Titans did under Shane Bowen for years. That one is...
If it's bad under
just
two
a
straight
head scratcher.
coordinators, I think that means it's a personnel issue, not a coaching issue, right? If you get two different defensive coordinators and the problem persists, that tells me it's probably not coaching.
Yeah, no, that is true. So yeah, building the trenches on both sides of the ball still a priority, or should be, heading into this offseason. And yeah, I mean, when you have a great quarterback, it seems to mask some of your other weaknesses around your roster. So hopefully, however the Giants choose to address the quarterback position this offseason, hopefully it is in a way that brings somebody in that helps elevate everyone around them, whether it's a rookie, veteran, bridge quarterback, whatever the situation is.
And by the way, a rookie's not going to elevate everyone else in year one. So I'm going to get that.
No, that happens rarely. I will say CJ Stroud did do that last year, but
What did it look like this year
a
now?
lot different this year. And again, that was way more of the outlier than the norm for a rookie quarterback.
Correct. So
100%.
yeah, do not count on a rookie quarterback. You need to have a good situation for the rookie quarterback to succeed. The rookie quarterback isn't going to create a good situation for you.
I will say, though, that we have seen some of this year's rookie quarterbacks. I mean, Jaden Daniels, I would say, is kind of elevating the guys around him.
He's
in
slowed down a
Washington.
lot, though.
He definitely has slowed down. I feel like that rib injury might have played a role in that.
Or maybe.
But overall on the season, I mean, they've already exceeded expectations in Washington for this year.
I agree with that.
I would say the same with Bo Nix in Denver.
Now, the Bo Nix
yeah.
situation is actually, he has one of the lowest pressure rates in the whole league. Like, he's rarely been pressured this year. Their offensive line has done a really nice job, and it's funny, it's offseason, they're like, yeah, maybe we'll trade Cortland Sutton. Well, good thing they didn't, because he's
Seriously.
been really, really good for them this year.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about how Bo Nix just landed in the best possible scenario for him individually to succeed in and right away. But even like Caleb Williams, who was supposed to be, the greatest quarterback prospect in years, he's shown flashes of playing well and looking great, looking like that number 1 overall pick. And then he's had some weeks and moments where he's looked bad.
Yeah, sure.
So
I think Drake Mays actually probably elevated a bad situation in New England maybe as well as anyone else, to be honest with you.
for sure. I mean, their record might not show it, but Drake May is so far from the issue
Yes,
in New
correct,
England.
yes.
Like, he's the only good thing that they've got going for them right now. If they improve the situation, they are a situation where they put the quarterback in first before improving everything around him. Moving forward, they will now be building everything around him, and I think it won't be long before we see a big jump from that Patriots team. So, yes, you can't expect a rookie to come in and just, flip the switch and all of a sudden you got a playoff team when you're, at least record-wise, one of the worst teams in the league the year before. But it's certainly, when you get that quarterback in and you realize, like, this is our guy, it obviously puts you in on the right track and heading in the direction where you want your organization to be.
Yeah. No, 100%. Look, you have to start somewhere. If it doesn't happen in year 1, the sooner you get the guy in here, the sooner year 3 shows up, right? When he's ready to go. So, absolutely 100%. Hi, Charlie in Portland, Maine. I haven't talked to you in a while, buddy. How are you?
Hey, John. Hey, Matt.
How was your
you all
Thanksgiving,
doing?
Charlie?
Hey, Charlie.
It was wonderful. It was great.
Did you cook, or do you have somebody cook for you?
No, I cook.
What'd you cook?
Oh yeah.
What was on the menu?
Well, we had turkey, but I also the night before we had lobster. So.
Ooh,
Lobster
okay.
linguine.
Very Italian of you. I like it.
Sounds very good.
Yes. And in Christmas it will be all Italian food. So.
For Christmas, do you do the Night of the Seven Fishes or whatever it is?
Yeah, the 7 fishes.
Nice.
Yep. Yeah, we do that, and then probably some lasagna and a bunch of stuff on Christmas Day.
Now,
So,
do you go a little beef lasagna, a little vegetable lasagna? What do you do?
No, it's pretty much vegetarian lasagna.
Okay, very good.
But we'll have meatballs and sausage and
Ooh,
brajol and a bunch of different things.
little sausages and peppers.
Yeah.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah,
I
you know what
like that.
brajol is?
You get me
Brajol
hungry.
is
Oh, I don't beat brajol. Very good.
Yeah.
Now, do you roll anything in it or no? Do you roll it?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, I roll it. I put a little ricotta and some pine nuts,
Ooh.
cannoli nuts, and some parsley, of course, and a little oregano, and that I like it that way. That's pretty good.
I feel like I'm blowing this. I need Tino here with all like the Italian food preparation to be commenting on this, but you're making me hungry, Charlie. I might show up if I got nothing else going on, man. What do you got?
Hey, you're welcome anytime. Hey, look, I'm glad you brought those stats up, Matt, about Young and etc. I mean, really, you think we're going to do well with old Mother Hubbard and voodoo there on the left and right side?
You got to run the ball, Charlie. Look, that's the whole thing about this week. You cannot put yourself in pass situations. Like if you go down 2 scores in this game with your issues you have at tackle, you're going to run into problems. You're going to have to run the ball and keep this a 1-score game so you can control how you're running your offense and you don't let the score dictate a bunch of 5-step, 7-step straight drop back pass game. Because you're right. If you get into that type of game, you're going to have problems.
Yeah, and how often have we been able to do that? Not too often. Hey, the other thing is we can't stop the run even with Dex there, carrot cake there. So how are we going to stop the run when they're not there? So it's. I think Kamara's going to have 150 yards. And Carr's streaky, right? If he gets on one of those Carr streaks, he'll tear us apart, especially if they're running the ball. So I think Saints come marching in with a win. I just don't see us winning another game, to be honest with you.
No, Charles, serious question. Are you actively rooting for the team to lose, or do you still get annoyed?
I don't have to because they stink.
No, sorry, I'm not saying if you have to or not, but let me put it this way. Let's say game starts, you're sitting there with your little bowl of popcorn, whatever you got, and the Saints go and they score on their first drive. They go up 7-0. Are you happy or are you mad?
No, I'm not mad.
But are you happy, or is it just like numb at this point? I'm trying to figure out where you're at.
Numb. No, I'm not numb. I'm just like I expected it. I expect the Saints to win. So I expect to see our defense play awful. I expect, you know what I mean? So
I know what you're saying, but are you happy? I don't want expectations. Like, do you when the game loses and the game ends and the Giants win or lose? If they lose, are you happy for like a draft pick or what?
Yes, I'm happy at that point because we need to lose out so we get a quarterback. We need a quarterback now.
Do you have a favorite quarterback yet, Charlie?
I like Cam Ward.
Okay.
But I don't care. The thing is, I have a problem with conviction, that word. That drives me nuts because it's an excuse to have wrong results.
What do you mean?
In other words, Shane's got conviction on Mr. Balance, Evan Neal. Or Shane has conviction on Daniel Jones for 3 years. He had conviction on him. Oh, he drafted this guy. At least he had conviction on him. But if it's the wrong result, I don't care what the conviction is. It's wrong.
Charlie, I think the point is the only reason conviction's an important word is just that it means that they have a very strong opinion that's probably somewhat universal. Well, no, it might be wrong. Not all convicted opinions are correct. Absolutely not.
But then people use it as an excuse. Well, at least he had conviction on him. What are you going to do, right?
Well,
that's what I have a problem with.
Yeah, Charlie, I'm with you. I don't think that's an excuse.
Look, for any general manager across the NFL, if you take a quarterback, come out and say, we have conviction on this guy, we think he's going to be great, and then he flops, it doesn't matter what your conviction was.
You're still wrong.
You're still wrong, and everyone, that's how they see it. I don't think it's an excuse.
I just teed this up. All right, so all these beat writers, a lot of people on BBK, Carl Banks, Papa, Sean O'Hara, everybody, right? Daniel Jones is the guy. All he needs is an offensive line. All he needs is a wide receiver. All he needs is this and that. And I told you for 6 years he wasn't the guy.
Yeah, and Charlie, you were right. You were right.
Okay, thank you. But I don't just want to be right. I want all you guys who've been pumping this guy up for so long to write a letter and to apologize to the fan base, at least 50% of the fan base, that you were wrong, and we're sorry that we even criticized you for saying that Daniel Jones wasn't the guy.
Charlie, Charlie, we said that we had a whole 10, 15-minute conversation about it, Matt and I, when we hosted that week, and we explained that we were wrong and why we were wrong. We said it on the air.
He was wrong? Did Paul ever say he was wrong?
Well, that's Paul. Paul never admits he's wrong about anything. Charlie, I cannot control other people. All Matt and I can do is control what we say and what we believe. And we explain, we explained, and I think we were logical about it, why we thought with a better situation, Daniel will be better. All right? There was a better situation this year. The results weren't better. We were wrong.
Right.
And look, we were wrong. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're right about stuff. Sometimes you're wrong about stuff. And
well,
I don't make other people that have wrong opinions about things come on and relitigate that and write letter of apologies. We all have opinions about things. We're all right sometimes. We're all wrong sometimes. That's just the way it goes. And by the way, and Charlie, and this is true. Did me and Matt both not also advocate if you could get one of those top 3 quarterbacks last year to go and get one of those top 3 quarterbacks?
Well, they should have got Penix or JJ or even Bo Nix.
And that might turn out to be true too, but that remains to be seen. We don't know that for sure yet.
2 of those guys you just mentioned haven't started a game yet.
Yeah, I know, but they're still. Well, see, the thing is, this is what I'm saying. How can you bring back Shane and Dable after making that huge mistake on this quarterback? Constantly saying he can take us to the Super Bowl. No, all he needs is this. All he needs is that. And no, we're not going to take Penix or JJ or Nix because Jones is better than them. We're sticking with Jones.
Well,
they should be fired.
Joe Shea never said that they didn't take one of those quarterbacks because they thought Daniel Jones was better. He said there was conviction from the front office on the top.
Wrong again.
Yeah, about the top 3 quarterbacks who all went before the Giants had a chance, where they even attempted to trade up and could not do it because the other teams were unwilling to move. Those are the 3 guys that clearly the Giants felt like they can be franchise quarterbacks, but they didn't have an opportunity to get them. It takes 2 to make a trade. Like, you can't just say the Giants should have gotten Drake May when they did not have an opportunity to do it.
And Charlie, just real quick.
What did Shane offer the Patriots? What?
We don't know.
We don't know, but
there were reports,
based on all reports that it was extremely significant.
The reports of day of the draft has said that the Patriots basically said there is nothing you can offer us without being the most ridiculous trade of all time that's going to make us move this pick.
And Charlie, the other thing that does annoy me a little bit, and this isn't you, this is other people out there say, well, then you should just pick one of the other guys. Here's the problem with that, and I'm being completely honest. If Joe. There's a chance that even maybe Joe, and this is, again, I'm talking hypothetically. I have no idea if this is true. Let's say Joe Shea and his scouting staff liked one of the other quarterbacks, right? Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But let's say in this theoretical make-believe world that I'm putting us in right now, maybe they liked one of those 3 guys. They go to Brian Dable, and they say, Dabes, what do you think of these 3 quarterbacks? I like this particular guy. What do you think? And Dable says, I don't think I can make that work. I don't think he can make it. The last thing you want to do is, Charlie, is give your coach a player that he doesn't believe in. So that's why the word conviction is important, because the guy that's going to run the offense with the quarterback has to have a belief and an understanding of how he can use that guy and how he wants to play, that player can succeed. Or you're going to run into the Brian Flores situation with Tua in Miami, where you give the coach a quarterback that he doesn't want, and it's a disaster. So there has to be some... I'll use the word again, conviction from the front office and the coach together to bring in a player at quarterback that's going to be the cornerstone of your franchise, you hope, for a long time. You don't want to give a coach a quarterback that he doesn't believe in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand that. But if the coach is wrong about the evaluation of that quarterback, then that conviction, it doesn't matter.
No, of course
But
it
let me say
doesn't.
this.
And by the way, and then people will eventually pay the price for that, right? Down the
Yeah.
road. But you
So
cannot
what-
force the quarterback down a head coach's throat, especially when the head coach is in charge of the offense.
Yeah,
right? You
I mean,
can't
look,
do that.
we've said so many times that Bo Nix was the perfect fit for Sean Payton's offense. That doesn't mean if he was the Giants quarterback that he'd be having the same success in Brian Dable's system.
Right, and we
Well,
also said last year that, look,
know what
maybe
you
maybe
do?
we wouldn't pick Nix or Penix that early, but if Brian Dable's all sold in on these guys and he thinks he can win with them, by all means, I'm going to trust the guy that's been coaching offense in the league for 20 years over my dopey evaluation.
Yeah, but don't you think that if the guy is a good quarterback and you know that he would excel in a certain system, that you would change your system so he can play?
Well,
I
no,
mean,
but sorry,
you
my
know-
no, but my point system aside is that Brian Dable, ostensibly, the reasons why the Giants probably did not pick one of those three quarterbacks, they did not believe that they could have high level success in the National Football League, regardless
Yeah, well,
of system.
the guy they kept didn't have success, and they had to release.
Now, Charlie, real quick,
Let me say
one thing, and then you can finish, because I think this has
Okay,
actually been a pretty good, productive conversation for once.
All right.
Will you at least admit that after the 2022 season, it would have been extremely difficult to move on from Daniel Jones?
No, not at all. They should have tagged him and signed.
No, but
Barkley.
but that's not
But if
moving on
Barkley-
from him. That's not moving on from him, Charlie.
But
Would it have been
if
extremely difficult to move on, not on the roster?
Yeah.
Bye Daniel
I would
after
have moved on.
2022.
If he had presented me with that type of contract, I would have said, Jones, go out there and see what you can get. Come back to me, and I'll tell you if I want to keep you or not.
Okay.
But the other thing he could have done.
That is living
tagged him
dangerously,
and said,
but that's living dangerously, Charlie. But I understand your thought process on it.
Or either that, you tag him and say, this year, 2022, was a fluke because our defense won most of the games for us, and the guy named Barkley was the one who got us to a 7-2, 8-2 record in the first place. He wasn't the total offense. It was Barkley who was the total offense that year.
Both
So
guys
I
were a
would have
part of it,
tagged
but
him and
yes.
said, do it again. Do it again. 15
No,
touchdown
Charlie, that's
passes.
fine. I get that, and that is a perfectly defendable position to have.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I
now
just wanted to
what
say
was your
this
final
to
point?
you and Matt.
Yes.
My final point: if we end up 2-15, how can you keep Shane and Dable on this team as a GM and head coach? How can you do that with Jones being released, with Barkley, all these ex-Giants players just playing incredibly well somewhere else? How can these two guys be here to pick a quarterback and to think these guys can do it? How?
Charlie, that'll be a decision John Mara will have to make. That's way above our pay grade. That'll be a decision John Mara will make after the year. And there's no reason to talk hypotheticals here because we don't know what's going to happen in the final 5 games.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'll add on that is that there are many, former NFL executives, general managers that will tell you when it comes to a rebuild, the process takes time. You got to let it play out. And, it might not always work, but you're not going to know unless you actually give it the time to eventually get those results. Now, when Joe Schoen spoke to the media a couple of weeks ago, he was asked, point blank, do you think that your success in that first season in 2022 led to some evaluations or misevaluations on how close the roster was to being that perennial contender that Joe Schoen and Brian Dable said they wanted to build when they got here? And Joe Schoen said, yeah, I think it's fair to say that. He said that. His words, he said that. The team made a surprise playoff run when no one outside of this building thought it was possible. They won a playoff game, the first playoff win in a decade. And that led to some decisions that Joe Schoen has literally admitted, was potentially some misevaluations on where the roster was and how close it actually was being that perennial contender. And you talk about someone admitting, potentially admitting a mistake. You want apology letters. You're not going to get an apology letter, but the GM basically said, like, yeah, you know what? That success might have led to us making some decisions that we would want back now.
Yeah.
You're not going to get a more direct admission than that.
Yeah. I mean, look, they're not, and I know it was easy to say franchise Daniel. Keep in mind, with the way they structured his contract, his cap number, his first year of that new contract, I think was around like $10 or $11 million. If you franchise him, that's a $31 million cap hit that year, right? It might have been 32. I don't remember, which was 31 and a half, something like that, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So that's $20 million you got to find somewhere, right? Where you find that $20 million? So it would have made other decisions more difficult that year, like bringing in Bobby Okereke, Saquon Barkley. How do you structure that contract, bringing him back? And then if you want to bring him back long term, you pay him whatever it would have taken to make him stay, or $15 million a year, whatever he was asking for. Then you'd have to deal with that. And I don't know what portion of that's going to be guaranteed over 2 years. So, do you not like having the extra year on the contract and dead money next year? Overall, you're going to have $80 million spread over 3 years, 20 next year, and then it would have been 60 last year and this year put together versus 30 in 1 year. Is the 30 in 1 year preferable? Sure, absolutely. But 30 in that 1 year where the Giants were not swimming in cap space that offseason, they were still kind of coming back from cleaning up the previous offseason. Carrying that $30 million cap at that first year on Jones was difficult. Now, they paid the price on this year's deal, where his cap number was over 40. But it was more manageable based on how the rest of the salaries on the team were structured. So it wasn't the easiest thing to just say franchise him. That would have led to other tougher decisions in that first year. Maybe you have to push more money for Dexter and Andrew Thomas down the road. Who knows what that would have meant. But there were difficulties with that as well. And look, Paul and I were on every day. We talked about that contract situation for 3 months here. So we went through it inside and out. But, yeah, look. Guys, look at the record. Look where we are. We know nothing was done perfectly. And so does Joe Schoen. To Matt's point, he said it himself. So,
yeah, and, to talk about that big cap hit on the franchise tag, let's not forget, when you put a franchise tag on a player, until they actually come and sign that contract, which we saw that same offseason with Saquon did not happen until the day before training camp, that is a $31 million lock on your cap space. We see all GMs and teams across the league, moving money around, doing these cap gymnastics to fit more players in. You cannot do that when the player has not signed the franchise tender. So that would have been a $31 million just block on whatever cap space the Giants had that offseason, which, as you just mentioned, they didn't have a ton of offseason cap space to work with in the first place that offseason.
Right.
That $12 million or $11.5 million cap hit for Saquon's franchise tag that was locked in because he didn't sign until the day before training camp, that already was a hindrance on some of the moves that they probably wanted to make. Now imagine a cap hit 3 times the size. They wouldn't have been able to do anything that offseason.
Yeah. And look, again, that doesn't mean that was the right decision. Obviously, you go back, you can turn back the clock if you want. But
of course,
there were reasons why they did it the way they did
was
it.
my point.
I know that.
Because there were reasons behind it.
I understand that. I'm just making sure
they
understand that. So I don't want to relitigate that whole thing again. But there were difficult decisions that had to be made. And Charlie, look, no one, me, Matt, we're not going to hesitate to admit when we're wrong. We're wrong about a lot of stuff. Everyone is. It's just the way it goes. That's sports. That's why it's fun. Not everyone's right about everything. Tyler on Long Island. He's up next. Hi, Tyler.
Hey, John. Hey, Matt. How you guys doing?
What's up, Tyler?
Hey, what's going on? I just want to get your guys' opinion on Joe Schoen's strategy. I found that in his first 3 drafts, he's really relied on need. And, John, I listened to a lot of your draft stuff, and it's naive to think that NFL franchises don't consider need and everything. But
no, of course they do. I get that, Tyler. I know.
If you look at the 2023 draft, those first 4 picks are all need, and that 2023 draft is not really working out well. So I just want to get you guys' opinion on, do you think that Joe Schoen reaching on need has kind of put this franchise in the position that they are?
Yeah, but Tyler, I don't think those – I agree. They managed to get players at positions of need. I agree with that. But if you look at the relative big boards of, and this is the only thing we have to judge off of, right? If you look at the big boards of experts like that do the draft stuff for a living, Evan Neal, Kayvon Thibodeau were drafted right where they were supposed to be drafted. Deonte Banks was drafted right where he was supposed to be drafted based on projections. These weren't, John Michael Schmitz. A lot of people had him projected as a late first round, early second round pick. They got him, pick like 50 or give or take?
Right.
So they did not pick players above where most people had them rated on their draft boards. If they had, I'd be like, yeah, they reached and it burned them. But these were guys that, heading into those drafts, Tyler, before they even picked those players, and this is not me retconning my opinions. I was sitting there, oh my gosh, if the Giants get Evan Neal with the 5th pick, with the, not even talking about the 7th pick, the 5th pick, I would have been thrilled. If you didn't get Kayvon Thibodeau on those picks, I would have been thrilled. Like, that was like heading into that draft before they even picked the players. That was like my best case scenario for how it could have went. Deonte Banks was literally, before that draft started, the guy I was targeting for the Giants in the first round. That's the guy I wanted before the draft even started. So that's why, while the results haven't been what you wanted them to be in some of these cases, I have trouble getting too upset with the Joe Shane drafts because the guys he picked are the guys that I liked, that I wanted him to pick before the drafts even happened.
I'm with you as well. And, you mentioned the 2023 draft. Well, they had to trade up for Deonte Banks. They had to trade up for Jalen Hyatt. They knew that if they stayed where they were, there was a good chance they weren't going to get those guys. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to say that they reached just to pick a player of need. I don't think that necessarily fits. And if you even want to look at this year's draft class, which obviously has been the most promising of the 3 draft classes since, this regime took over. I mean, I've seen people say like, oh, the Giants took Tyler Newman just because they needed a safety. Well, yeah, the Giants did need a safety, but guess what? Tyler Newman is tied for the most tackles on the team.
Well,
He's had a big impact.
He was rated as a 2nd-round pick by most people.
He was
it's not
exactly
like they picked him out of turn.
Where he expected him to be. If anything, in this year's draft class, I feel like Drew Phillips, people thought maybe reached a little bit, and he's been great as a slot corner. So
right.
I understand where you're coming from because the draft picks that have been, especially these last 2 years, did address positions of need, but I don't agree that they were reaches at all.
Yeah, in fact, I think, Tyler, I think they've been lucky that in a lot of these drafts, the best players that were available at the time happened to actually line up with positions of need. I think they've been fortunate. Now, again, so far, maybe some of those haven't worked out the way we would have liked, but I do think in that way they've been fortunate. Go ahead. I'm sorry for interrupting you. Go ahead.
No, you're good. And I'm a very big draft guy, John. I think you do a great job with the coverage. I'm very all year.
Thank you.
The draft is the best in my opinion. But I feel like going in, the positions that the Giants are going to target, and that is the positions they target. Last year, they're going for a tight end. 2023, they needed a center. They needed a wide receiver. They need a quarterback, and they always go for it. I get it that, you'd be naive to think that need isn't considered, but it feels like it's very stressed. And then just the last point, and I'll hang up.
Yeah.
One of the points that Joe Shane always harps on is the youth of the roster. Every press conference, he always mentions the youth of the roster and how many minutes the youth of the roster. You know another team in the NFL that is very young? Green Bay Packers.
The Packers are. You're right about that.
Correct. What is the difference between the Green Bay Packers and New York Giants? Is it coaching? LaFleur is lights out. I do agree with that. But it's also player development and the drafting. So you can mention the youth all you want, but if they're not producing, it's an irrelevant stat. I'll hang up, and I thank you guys for your time.
Thank you, Tyler. I think
Thanks,
Jordan
Tyler.
Love probably something to do with that, too.
That's what I was going to say as well.
Yes.
I mean, look, you're right. And I don't think Joe Shane uses the youth of the roster as like a complete crutch because eventually those young guys need to develop and turn into your best players. Obviously, I don't think anyone is going to deny that. But, I mean, when Joe Shane at his press conference was mentioning the youth, he was stating facts. It is a fact that the Giants have had the second youngest team in terms of snaps played this season, which again, that only covers you for so long. Like eventually those young guys need to develop and grow and become some of your roster's better players. But I don't think it's, fair to rule out that the Giants the current young players on the Giants roster can't still grow and develop and become that caliber that that will eventually lead this team for years to come. They're still all young. I mean, you can't, as they say, you can't judge a draft until how many years after? 3, 4? So these guys are still growing. They're still learning. Yeah.
Hey, look, and I'll just say this too. It's not like the Giants just had one need in those draft classes. You go back to the 2022 draft, pardon me. They had a need for a wide receiver that year. They didn't have a wide receiver. They needed a wide receiver that year. They could have picked Chris Olave or Garrett Wilson if they wanted to, but they thought these guys were better prospects, right? I have it on fairly good authority, or at least my belief is, no one's told me this. My belief is that if Sauce Gardner was sitting, they would have picked Sauce Gardner. Right?
Yeah.
So, were they picking for need then, or would they have picked the best player? Cornerback was a need too. The roster stunk. like they needed a lot of players in a lot of different spots.
Yeah.
They picked the guys they thought were best.
Look, going back to what I was saying before about what Joe Schoen said at his press conference about potentially misevaluating how far along the roster was, I think everyone kind of forgets that when Joe Schoen took over before the 2022 season, it was widely believed by like everyone across the league
Multi-year rebuild.
that he was going into one of like the worst possible situations roster-wise to be going into, with no cap space, limited talent on the roster already. And again,
quarterback on the last year of his rookie contract.
And again, that the success they had that first season in 2022, I think kind of flushed all of the, prior regimes, miscalculations, whatever you want to call it, flushed it away and made people forget that this was still a situation that Joe Schoen entered that was quite bad. And like everyone knew it.
Now, there were some players left that, obviously, Dexter Lawrence, Andrew Thomas, Saquon Barkley.
There was some
Xavier
talent
McKinney.
on the roster for
Right.
sure. But as an overall roster, Joe Schoen took over a roster that overall was just not filled with much talent.
Oh, I'm off the top of my head. Who was their second-round pick in the Thibodeau?
Wandell,
right? So they need a wide receiver. They picked a wide receiver in the second round. They could have easily picked Olave or Wilson
traded
if they wanted to.
down, I believe, twice before picking him, stockpiling a couple of picks.
Yep. Mm-hmm. They drafted Cordell Flott that year, too. So clearly they needed a corner. They could have picked a corner earlier. But Stingley and Sauce were both off the board at that point when they picked the Kayvon and Evan Neal early. And the following year, they picked another corner in Deontay Banks. I'm trying to remember who else was available that year that they could have picked at positions of need. I have to go back
in 2023.
In 2023.
The only corner that was still available that, looking back, you could say maybe, could have gone that way would be Joey Porter. But you got to remember at the time,
he almost dropped to the second round that year.
He did. I think he was the last pick in the first round, or one of the last picks.
Something like that, yeah.
Look, at the time, Wink Martindale was the defensive coordinator, and you could not find one NFL draft expert that would not have said that Deontay Banks was the perfect fit for Wink's defense.
Yeah.
He was. On paper, he was the perfect fit. So that match right there made just way too much sense.
He were the guys that got picked after Deontay Banks, all right? You had Dalton Kincaid, the tight end, Mozzie Smith, Anton Harrison, offensive tackle, Miles Murphy, defensive end. None of those guys have really – Kincaid's been fine, but none of the other guys have really worked out. Brian Brzee, who in New Orleans, we talked about him, he's been pretty good. Nolan Smith, he's been a slow start to his career in Philadelphia. Felix Anaduke Uzama, the defensive end for the Chiefs, he hasn't given them a ton. Then you have Porter, first pick of the second round that year, 32nd overall, because that was the year the Patriots, I think, vacated their pick, or somebody vacated the Dolphins vacated their pick that year. It was somebody. Then you had like
Patriots
Will Levis,
got Christian Gonzalez.
Because the Commanders decided to take Emmanuel Forbes for some reason. Then you have Michael Mayer, Steve Avila, who's been okay, Derek Hall, Matthew Bergeron, Jonathan Mingo, Isaiah Foskey, BJ Ojolari. So which one of these guys would you have rather had than Deontay Banks as I go through this list? Is kind of the point I'm trying to make.
I mean, looking at that second round, easier said now, but I guess Brian Branch.
Branch is
I
like
very
Brian
good,
Branch.
but
how did he last to 45?
He went to 45. He was not supposed to be a first-round pick.
I thought he could be a late one, to be honest with you. I was shocked he lasted that long. He was a good player, but he's a safety.
Well, yeah.
He's safety.
Again, easier now to look back. And
at that point, you still had
McKinney
McKinney on your roster at that point, too.
Yeah.
So, look, guys, the draft is hard. Even the best general managers and the best drafters miss picks all the time. We talk about how well the Cowboys have drafted, right? Well, they drafted Luke Schoonmaker and Mozzie Smith in rounds 1 and 2, 2 years ago. That does not look very good right now. The Eagles have had some bad picks over the years, too, that have not worked out. Jordan Davis, he has not played particularly well for them.
How about picking Jalen Rager over Justin Jefferson?
That's
Can you
a
imagine
great
if
one.
Justin
That's a great
Jefferson
one.
was
Thank you.
on the Eagles right now?
Yeah, I know. So, guys, it is what it is. But, no, I don't think that they've reached for need. I think they've addressed needs, but I don't think they've reached with any of these picks for need.
I'm with you. 100%.
With the way I've seen it. And, again, this is me being honest. You guys have heard my coverage heading into these drafts. Those are the guys I wanted which is why I have trouble getting all up in arms about it. Just shows you can be wrong sometimes. And again, I think it's too early to judge for a lot of these guys whether or not you're wrong or not, too, to Matt's point earlier. All right, for Matthew Citak, I'm John Schmeelk. That's Big Blue Kickoff Live presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. Tomorrow it'll be Citak and Dottino. We'll talk to you then.